sharks. Hey, y'all, welcome back. Today, we're checking out why did London try so hard to ban shark sculptures?
While riding my bike around London, I stumbled upon this and was like,
what? Surprise, sharks raise questions that need answers.
So once back home to Google, I went with a search query that would turn the next 6 weeks of my life real weird, with phone calls and legal consultations and hundreds of pages of documentation about zoning. But
Somebody has a little bit of OCD. Be sure to go to CGP Grey and like and subscribe. Yo, if I saw these sharks in the river, I would think, oh, cool, a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of whimsy, great. And I would have just ridden on. I would not have searched it out. But that's why we come here, right?
Surprise, sharks raise questions that need answers.
So once back home to Google, I went with a search query that would turn the next 6 weeks of my life real weird, with phone calls and legal consultations and hundreds of pages of documentation about zoning. But it started with I'm feeling lucky, which landed me on a Guardian newspaper article about the sharks. They're part of an art competition. Apparently, shark art has a history in England.
Okay, I guess.
Oh, really?
But the article said the sharks were next to a warehouse in the London borough of Hackney, but I found them next to a boat club in Islington.
Well, can't just let a thing like that go.
Yeah, you can.
Give me a second. Been at this for a while. Okay.
So back to Google, where I found Antepavilion, the warehouse hosting the art competition, with a giant balloon outside? Okay, don't get distracted. You're here for the shark art competition. But wait, Hackney fight? What's this? And so it began. It seemed like because of the sharks, Hackney Borough was trying to get this warehouse/artist studio place shut down. But the more I read, the weirder it got. Like this correspondence with the police about their forced entry into the warehouse to stop a ballet performance. What?
Whoa, y'all. This wonderful person has a combination of OCD and ADHD. That's got to be a nightmare.
Okay, too much. Stop, back to the original competition, which had asked art entrants to consider, quote, an ambition to expose and question the authoritarian workings of our planning culture has always been fundamental to Antepavilion. Entries that respond to the tension between authoritarian governance of the built environment and aesthetic libertarianism will be particularly welcomed in the face of the prevailing attempts by Hackney to close down the Antepavilion Commission. One entrant, sharks. 5 of them, full scale, the big one's a megalodon, leaping from the water singing.
Cool.
The title of this piece, Sharks, with an exclamation mark. What could compete with that? Nothing, which is why Sharks won and construction began. Cool, but like, what's the deal with the beef in this brief?
Well, now, weeks later, and after way more hours of stress than I ever expected from this project, I can now tell you a very simplified version of what happened for comprehensibility reasons and legal reasons.
It starts 5 years ago when Antepavilion held their first art competition, with winner HVAC, a sitting area atop the warehouse roof from which to admire the canal.
That's hilarious. HVAC. I can see it now. A giant air conditioning vent on the top of the building. That's hilarious. Okay.
Disguised as an air duct to hide from Hackney and planning permission. The next year's winner was an inflatable yellow barge. That's what this is. Also, did you notice HVAC the first time?
I didn't.
You didn't, because it's disguised. Anyway, the barge inflated so it could be a pop-up transportable venue space that could deflate and disappear at a moment's notice. And also so it could fit under London's many tiny canal bridges, like the ones on either side of the warehouse. The year after's winner,
I swear this is all connected.
Potemkin Theatre. It's just one wall, nothing to see here, but also serves as the backdrop for a stage on the roof. It was this last art erection, the opposite of incognito, that drew the attention of the London borough of Hackney. Oi, said Hackney, you can't build that here. What, this? It's nothing, only the backdrop to some performances we plan on holding.
Hey, Hackney, you need some whimsy in your life. You should be appreciating this, right?
Do you enjoy ballet? Not really. Hey, what's that? Nothing. And wait, what's that? It doesn't look like a code-legal air duct. Why no, this is HVAC, a piece that's a playful subversion of planning legislation.
It's art.
Exploiting permitted development rights to confront the habitation of rooftop. Okay, that's it. Enforcement notice. Pursuant to Section 172(2) of the Town and Country Planning Act, Antepavilions' unauthorized structures are unacceptable in terms of their size, location, and design, which adversely affect the surrounding character, appearance, and architectural integrity of the surrounding conservation area in which they are located.
Hackney, These people are trying to bring you some whimsy. They're trying to bring you something to live for, right? Stop.
TLDR, remove yo art. You have 1 month. Thus, these 3 arts are the history of how the Hackney hatchet came down. But Antepavilion didn't remove their art, instead basing their brief on these events and picking the purposely provocative sharks as the winner. Now, as their construction finished and installation approached, what happened next is debated. Antepavilion says The Guardian approached them to do an article about sharks, a telephone interview conducted, and an article written. The very article I would find months later after publication. But pre-publication, according to Antepavilion, the article contained defamatory misquotes and deliberate misrepresentations. Antepavilion requested it be changed and wanted a copy of the recorded interview. The Guardian refused to change anything, didn't comment on the recording, instead asking for what the misquote was, leading Antepavilion to ask for the recording of the interview, and around it went. Anyway, the Guardian's article, which did get published as written and may or may not have misrepresented Antepavilion, may or may not have tipped off the London borough of Hackney that Antepavilion was arting again, soon to install the extremely impossible not to notice sharks.
Okay, y'all, we gotta look up this article. What could they have possibly said, right? The Guardian, sharks in our canals. They may have taken it down. This looks like a different article. Some of the sharks blow bubbles. That's kind of cool. The sharks will sing songs, give lectures to each other on the subject of architecture and urbanism. Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Wow. Y'all, if I was driving down the road and I saw this, I would think this is brilliant. I love this. This makes my city interesting, you know? They each have different personalities, the sharks. They're similar to girl band members like Sporty Shark and Ginger Shark. Clever. Da, da, da. After a 6-year legal battle, Hine was victorious. The planning inspector found in favor of the shark, stating, "In this case, it is not in dispute that the shark is not in harmony with the surroundings, but then it is not intended to be in harmony with them." I guess this is referring to the shark in the roof. 6-year legal battle. Okay. This goes deeper. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of the video. Let's just watch the video.
Again, soon to install the extremely impossible not to notice sharks. Hackney packed the paper in their little briefcase to use as evidence as they ran to a London judge to grant an emergency injunction to stop sharks. They had to run because that very morning the sharks were being loaded into the canal. 1 shark in the water. 2 sharks in the water. 3 sharks in the water. 4 sharks. Stop that shark! Injuncted. Wait, let me see that. Ooh, this is very confusing. I need to check with my lawyer about what this means. 4 sharks in the water? No, seriously, injuncted. And thus Hackney blocked the final shark and halted Antepavilion from doing anything without express planning permission until further judgment. Look here, you're in a conservation area. You can't just do what you want. But 4 sharks had escaped, and the injunction didn't require their removal, so in the canal they stayed, while trapped inside, the final 5th looked on.
Aww.
Thus, in this moment, the halted
trapped.
sharks became the pitch-perfect presentation of planning permission versus artistic freedom, as the paperwork grew from injunctions to witness statements, permission applications, briefs, reports on the history of art on the site, what in keeping with the conservation area means, queries of if sharks block the canal traffic, hey wait, who actually controls the canal? And arguments about if the very existence of the conservation area is like an abuse of power or a scam? I have no legal stance here. Please don't sue me. I can't say 1/10 of what I've heard, but, well, the 2 bridges are conserved, the canal is a conservation area, but the conservation area also happens to swoop up to include this one warehouse. And it's Hackney who can block a building in a conservation area, and it's also Hackney that gets to draw where the conservation area is. I mean, it's a lovely warehouse, but, however, the thing is,
I don't like these people running Hackney, whoever they are. They should be celebrating these sharks. They should be celebrating this Antepavilion, right? They're not harming anything. They're making the area interesting. Whimsy, for the sake of it.
To Antepavilion, all of these literally hundreds and hundreds of pages of legal documentation and countless human hours of everyone involved in a fight over shark sculpture are part of the art of sharks itself. Even the judges dragged into this make comments in their dry way about what a tangled pain this case is. Side note, I particularly enjoy...
We gotta read that. Having regard to all the foregoing factors and weighing them all carefully in the balance, which I have not found to be an easy exercise, I conclude that the balance of convenience falls on the side of granting the injunctive relief sought, both as to continuation of the prohibitions in the interim order, subject to some clarification of the language, and granting the mandatory relief sought by the claimant. The defendants are not prevented from exercising their freedom of expression by the order I am proposing to make, but are simply required to comply with the order pending resolution of the planning control issues raised by the Sharks installation. I don't know what that means. I have concluded for the reasons given in this judgment that it is just and proportionate to give some form of injunctive relief to the claimant. However, as we went nearly an hour beyond the originally estimated and allocated time of 2 hours for the hearing, which, bearing in mind that the court was sitting as the interim applications court, is, in any event, normally the maximum time that can be allotted given the pressure of other work in that court, we did not have time to consider the proper scope of the injunctive relief to be given. Y'all, I could not be a lawyer. I would fall asleep in court every
dry
day.
way about what a tangled pain this case is. Side note, I particularly enjoyed how, since the title of Sharks includes an exclamation mark, so too must all of these legal documents, which was funny every time I read it. Sharks.
Awesome.
Okay, back to the story. For months, Sharks chilled outside the warehouse while the paperwork rained down, though Hackney did eventually get them double injuncted and forced back inside. Meanwhile, up the canal happens to be the Islington Boat Club, members of which apparently chugged by sometimes to watch the ballet, and who developed a soft spot in their heart for sharks.
See?
And they had
People
water
loved
rights
it.
in their section of the canal, and so decided to offer their club as a new home. Antepavilion agreed to move the Sharks contingent on the boat club promising to tell Antepavilion about any bureaucratic paperwork problems that might arise. Are you guys sure you have rights to the water? As all those future papers would be part of the art of Sharks too. The boat club agreed, and the Sharks were brought up the canal to where they currently reside.
Okay, so all this paperwork of the legal situation was part of the art exhibit. I love that. That's so creative. Hackney, you're Streisanding yourself. You know what the Streisand effect is? Apparently Barbara Streisand had this house and someone published it online where it was, like pictures of it, and she worked hard to try to get those pictures removed, but because she worked hard to try to get those pictures removed, it caused more of an uproar and people saw where it was, and so by fighting it, she made it worse. And Hackney's doing that, right?
Delightfully right in full view of a primary school that
Great.
doubtless all the kids there now call Shark School, and right next to a public playground where Sharks is already inspiring the next generation of English shark artists, and where you too can go see them in their full sharkiness. But
Awesome.
if you do want to see them, you better hurry while you can. See, sometime after the relocation, the Islington Boat Club told Antepavilion, "Look, you need to take your sharks back, mate." Why? We won't tell you. But why? And then the boat club ghosted Antepavilion, never to give a reason. What happened is unknown, but if one were to speculate, I have no legal stance here, please don't sue me, the boat club seems underdeveloped for the value of the property it's on, and the appearance of sharks could have thrust them into a lot of bureaucratic trouble they weren't expecting about what exactly their rights to the water are, but who knows? Well, the boat club knows, but they're not saying anything other than, "Time to go, Sharks."
Oh, they probably don't want to admit it. They probably don't want to admit breaking the law, right?
Who knows? Well, the boat club knows, but they're not saying anything other than, "Time to go, Sharks." They must be removed before the end of this month, put back into the warehouse, held behind bars of planning permission paperwork, never to see the water again.
Damn. Y'all, this video is like 5 years old, so I'm sure they're gone by now.
Although, there's always that barge. Perhaps Sharks could ride again. Technically, not in the water, but upon it. Able to travel up and down London's canals, looking for a new home.
Excellent.
Sharks!
Okay. Are the sharks still there, y'all? Great music. Okay, y'all. Are these sharks still there? Sharks. London. They were there in 2021? Oh, that's probably where this was. Yeah, okay. In 2024 Hackney Council lost an appeal by Antepavilion to sharks on the region's canal. According to Antepavilion, Hackney Council now has to decide whether sharks requires planning pavilion permission. The Hackney sharks are back. Or are they? Are they art or a building? Oh, what's the deal with the sharks in the canal? They're back after an appeal from Hackney Council. Okay. Hackney Council enforcement notice against the display of art installations at Hoxton Docks has been quashed by the recent planning appeal decision. However, although Antepavilion has now been graciously liberated by the inspector to display art at the wharves, which it has been doing for 25 years anyway, the decision is not committal on when art requires planning permission. This is now for the council to decide in the first instance. Is it still there? Show me on a map. London, Hackney, Hackney, okay, Antepavilion, Antepavilion, there it is. Show me a satellite image. There they are. Oh, there's one. Hey. Well, that shows several of them. Okay, there. It looks like there's just one now. That's cool. This was taken in 2023, so who knows? It's hard to know how old this Google image is, but there it is. Way to go, Antepavilion Limited. I love irreverence, y'all. I guess, if the Hackney Council wasn't out there trying to quash stuff like this, there would be no irreverence, You gotta have an authority to rebel against. If they were fine with it, it wouldn't be as fun. Right? Y'all be sure to go to CGP Grey and like and subscribe. I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank y'all for watching this with me. And I'll see y'all next time. Sharks!